Good evening. Welcome to Street Talk. Here today with a repeat guest who we had some actually three and a half years ago, I believe, and one of the first people that we had on to discuss race and the seriousness and the differences and the way that we see the world. And a very important conversation for any of you who want to go back in the YouTube libraries. I see it still gets viewed like frequently, so I'm glad to see that. But my good friend Dennis Bradley
It's a pleasure to be here.
is running for Senate in the 23rd.
Correct.
I hear Ed Gomes, 9 lives that he has, 10 or 11, has decided to actually retire. And there's going to be an open seat for this, and obviously there's going to be a big race between 3 people that are actually friends of the show, who we've had each involved in, and I'm very proud to say that I know all 3 of you, and I'm certainly been involved with you over the last few years, and we've had long conversations, and so I'm looking forward to the show of what's going to come up over the next few months.
Sure.
But the first question I always got to ask, why are you running?
So I come from the mindset, my father being in the military in the United States Army of service. It's something that's been instilled in me since I was a young boy. My mother being very active in the community since as early as I could remember, being out there helping out in different capacities, whether it was a PTA or God, you name it, right? So that's always been my mindset, is that you don't have to wait to be a millionaire to serve. You don't have to wait to have a college degree to serve. You just have to have a heart and desire to see the will of God and to do right by your fellow man. And it's just my mindset. So it's a tremendous opportunity to be able to run. It's a great country that allows a person who doesn't come from nobility to serve the people of Connecticut, to serve in the 23rd District. So I find it very humbling. And it's just always been in my heart to want to serve in the capacity of being a legislator. It's what I feel I'm called to do. It's what I've spent the last 7 years of my life studying, the law, that is. It's what I did when I worked for Congressman Jim Himes, understand how the law works, understand how government works. And it's what I think I can do best if given the opportunity to serve the people of Bridgeport and Stratford, if God and the people allow me to do it.
Well, you know what? I look at people, and obviously, when you get involved in politics, I always try to take a look at the measure of the person, and the measure of the person, it has to do with where your heart comes from. And I know I saw this recent post that you put up on Facebook, which really kind of spoke to everything for me. And this was about your grandmother.
Yeah.
And what she did.
Yeah.
And I know it hit me straight here. Why don't you tell me about your grandmother? Because I think it's important to know why people do these things.
Sure. So my grandmother, God rest her soul, she recently passed away, and we buried her this past Friday. She was a woman who was faced with tremendous adversity. Not only was she a black woman, but more importantly, she comes from a very poor place in the world, and she was confronted with the death of her parents at a very young age. When she was 15 years old, both her parents died in a very tragic car accident, and she had 7 brothers and sisters. She was the eldest of the bunch, and back in those times, there wasn't any family organization, there wasn't any DCF, there wasn't anything that would allow them to get the necessary services and help. So here, a 15-year-old girl is forced to now raise her 6 brothers and sisters. So she took on that challenge. She did exactly that. A lot of them have become, whatever degree of success you want to have, but all contributing, hardworking members of society. And she later ended up meeting my grandfather and having 7 children of her own. And because she developed this reputation of kind of being a mother and being the person who takes care of people in the community, whenever there was a tragedy, whenever there was a disaster, people would start bringing children to her doorstep. And she was just the type of person that could never say no to somebody. She just had a really big heart, a really big bleeding heart. She would take on children. and raised them and helped raise them, and had no government help to do that, had no financing to do that. But little by little, people started taking notice, and there was a group of Christian ministers who came and saw what she was doing organically and started pouring into that. And she actually started running an actual orphanage, and kids from all over were being brought to her, and that's what she spent her life doing. She was 88 years old when she passed away. My aunt, who's 45, who has mental disabilities, she's always was the caretaker of my aunt throughout her life, since her birth until she passed away recently. But she just has that type of person. She doesn't see color. She doesn't see your money. She doesn't see where you come in society. She just sees a human being. And when they reach out to her and ask for help, she's just the type of person who can't turn a blind eye or turn the other cheek and ignore it. She just feels compelled to help. So that's why my father was raised. He was raised with his 7 brothers and sisters, but he was raised in a house full of orphans who were his brothers and sisters. And that mentality, that heart kind of gets passed on, I think, generation from generation, to feel a desire to help other people. And she always said to me, where 2 people can eat, 3 people can eat. There's no reason for you to turn someone away and say, it's only enough for me here, and I got to protect the little things that I have in life. When you share, you get more. And that was her mindset, and she put not only in word or in thought, but actually in deed. And she's been a great example for all of us, and I know she's in a better place now.
God bless her.
Yeah.
You know what? And I had to say it's a fitting tribute, and I'm glad that we could be a part of that, and somebody's life who's really well and truly about mission, and that's obviously Street Talk. We talk about mission.
Sure.
That's what we're a part of.
Sure.
And anytime people reach out, and I get it from all over different angles. I'm always willing to offer, like, the free advice or free information or anything else to people, because at the end of the day, we got to help each other out.
Right.
And that's the world that I want to look out at, is the world where we figure out a way to be able to raise each other up, and we figure out a way to help people to do better in where they're going. And I know for you, obviously, but becoming a lawyer, you actually helped me because I was back and forth about applying for my citizenship. I had a couple things from my past that I was concerned with.
Right.
And because of your encouragement, I actually went forth and I was sworn in. It's coming up almost three years now.
That's awesome.
And that's the sort of thing that I look at that we do for each other. And sometimes they're small acts, but sometimes they have an extraordinary meaning.
Right.
But I know going into to this, you look at your city of Bridgeport, and Bridgeport has a lot of its own specific issues because it's an urban community.
Sure.
And one of the things that I can tell you that I appreciate that the current grouping of people is they're together. And I think that's important because when you come together as a block or a group of people,
Sure.
You have the power and the standing to be able to get things done.
Right.
Sometimes that means holding things up.
Right.
But I know I look at it, and I look at some of the things that are important to Bridgeport right now, and I see how hard the delegation is working to get those things done. But I know, it takes communication.
Right.
And priorities, and I know for you, your priorities are much of what affects a lot of Bridgeport, which is justice.
Sure.
And I think what would you like to do, like as far as reforming the justice system?
Well, Dominic, you hit on a very important note, and I think that there's been a lack of cooperation among political leadership in Bridgeport for a long time, and you have the anti-movement, and you have the establishment, and you have all of these little factions, if you will, that divide our city. And it's a dangerous thing because it's been hindering growth. I look at the legislators who are there now in the House of Representatives. They've been doing tremendous work. You have people like Chris Rosario and Ezekiel Santiago and Representative Stallworth, and you have a lot of other representatives who have been there doing tremendous amount of work. I'm mentoring people who are specifically in my district, but we have other people in other districts as well who've been doing tremendous amount of work. But if both houses don't agree, then Bridgeport can't bring changes and funds and all the things that we're in dire need of in the city of Bridgeport. So it's an ability to collaborate and extend the olive branch. It's an ability to understand that you get a lot more with honey than you do with vinegar. It's a desire to work with people to see the city growth. It's where you put your stake, I think, as an individual. I've always said Bridgeport growth is my growth. If Bridgeport fails, I've failed. I've dedicated at least the last decade, or almost a decade, to the city of Bridgeport in the hope and with the belief that Bridgeport is going to change. We're going to be able to pivot and head in a different direction. And not just hoping and praying, but actually putting sweat equity into making that a reality. So I want to lock arms with the representatives and have the mindset of putting Bridgeport first. Because I genuinely believe that where Bridgeport goes, so goes the nation. Bridgeport represents what America might look like in the very foreseeable future. Urban, minority being majority, a lot of females in the area. So if we don't get it right, if we don't know how to manage our budget and spend more accurately and be honest about what's working and what's not working and get away from cronyism and get away from even the perception of corruption, which we're not that, but we have maybe a perception of that. If we don't start cleaning up house and having bigger dreams and more ambitious realities of what can be, then if Bridgeport fails, I see America failing. And I don't want that to happen. And I always say, not on my watch. So some of the things that I'm passionate about is just simply being a collaborator, of simply being a team player, of simply a person who understands that in politics, the greatest art is the art of compromise. Is understanding that it's not your way. We don't get elected to be dictators or to represent a faction or a fraction of our constituency. We're there to represent the entirety of the city and the entirety of the district. So I'm passionate about making sure that happens and making sure that we have a broad tent that everybody's included in. But specifically on some of the agenda items that we were talking earlier before we were on air, there's a great deal of work we need to do in our state in the areas of justice. There's a great deal, and when I say justice, I'm talking about specifically, we always talk about reentry when we talk about the criminal justice system. But I want to talk about not having to use the second chance, not having to have people who are reintegrated in society, but rather who avoid prison in its totality. And how do we do that? I think we have a strict adherence to our Constitution. Our Constitution, we proudly say we're the Constitution state. It's on our license plates and on a lot of other of our state regalia. Our Constitution proudly states we're the Constitution state. Our Constitution states that we must have a jury that are elected or selected by our peers. And what that means to me is that in America, and in the state of Connecticut spearheading this movement, we shouldn't have a jury that's all black, we shouldn't have a jury that's all brown, and we shouldn't have a jury that's all white. We should have a jury that represents the communities that we live in, and that's a very diverse community. And what happens when we do that is we have jurors who are selected, who come from diverse parts of the city, who have different racial and economic backgrounds, who sit together and they actually deliberate and talk about the evidence that was presented and hold that standard in criminal court, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a very high standard. It's a very high standard, and it's very rarely applied. What ends up happening is you have a person who's black or brown in the criminal justice system. They make up the majority of the people who go through the criminal justice system. And you have, by and large, in Fairfield County, people who are Anglo or white Americans who comprise our jurors. And what happens is we have these inherent biases, whether we're cognizant of them or we do it subconsciously. We look at a person, we say, well, you look like what the news portrays. You look at what I saw on CNN or Fox News or whatever news outlet we listen to. And we say, well, the cop said you did it. The prosecutor's saying you did it. They didn't pick your name out of the hat, so you must have done it. Maybe you did something. And whatever that something is enough to get you a conviction. So that needs to change. We need to ensure that our citizens feel that whether they're poor, whether they're black, whether they're brown, whether they're white, wherever they come from, you come to America, you get a fair shake at the system. And we're going to uphold our standards and what we've subscribed to and what we've told people we're going to live by. So if we do that, I think it goes a long way in preventing people getting a criminal record. Secondly, I honestly believe that we shouldn't have a background check that is as extensive as it is now. Right now, it's a total proliferation of anything you've ever done criminally. So you get a conviction, and it happened 30 years ago. 85% of crimes are nonviolent drug-related offenses, whether they're dealers or users, and you want to be a ditch digger, you want to work as a landscaper, you want to work in one of the trades. You get one of these convictions, and for the rest of your life, no matter how good of a citizen you become, they can always look up your background and use that against you. I think that's unfair. It ensures that people can continue with this revolving door of coming in and out of prison because they can't find a decent paying job. And we shouldn't do that to human beings. It's inherently lacks justice. So what I say is that if you've done a crime and it's gone X amount of years ago, and that's something we can craft with our legislators as to when we put a stop, and it's not relevant to the job that you're applying for, then they shouldn't be able to use it against you. Now, if you're a bank robber and you want to be a bank teller, maybe that goes on for the rest of your life. If you're a child molester and you want to be a teacher, that goes on for the rest of your life. But if you've sold drugs back in the 60s and 70s, and now you're applying to be a guy who rakes leaves, why are they using that against you? Doesn't make any sense. You've obviously you made a mistake. The vast majority of your life, you've done things the right way. Why not allow you to get a shot in society to continue to live a decent life?
You know, I was up at the Capitol. It must have been probably sometime last year, and they were having a criminal justice conference, and it really had a lot to do with juveniles coming up, and they were talking about when somebody touches the system, so to speak, for a young person, and it's not so much that that a person, I don't know how to say this exactly, a person who touches the system is likely to end up being involved in the system over a longer period of time and continually touch the system.
Right.
Whereas a person who didn't touch the system, who may have been doing the exact same things as the person that got involved in the system,
Right.
But because they didn't have that on their record and intervention or involved in, they ended up not being in a situation later on in life where they were arrested or in jail. Mm-hmm. Whereas at the time that it was happening, 16, 15, 16, 17 years old, all the people involved had done similar things. It was just a matter of who got caught and who didn't.
Right.
And this is part of the problem when you talk about that that bias that people have, is they automatically look at somebody who's, Hispanic, who's black, and other things along those lines, and they automatically assume that they've done that sort of thing, whereas they look at the white person coming in, and the kid's 16, 17 years old, and they're saying to him, well, why shouldn't we just give this kid like another chance? Mm-hmm. And therein lies a lot of the difference between where we continually have this round and round going through like the system, whereas if that black, Hispanic, whatever person were given that opportunity or were looked at in that way or didn't get caught, more than likely they're not going to be involved in the system later on in life. I mean, and this is how these biases and these things continue to go on. Right. I know the other bill that I was heavily involved with was Miller versus Alabama. That's basically saying you can't give someone below the age of 18 life without the opportunity for parole, because essentially it says that your brain's not fully developed until you're 26. If you have this happen at an early age, you have a better chance to come out and have better outcomes, because obviously your brain develops, you learn, and you'll do better. But I look at that situation. One of the things that they talked about in there was exactly what you're talking about. That for a lot of these kids, they don't have the maturity to be able to realize that they're taking this plea bargain, and they're thinking that they're going to be better off. They're not looking at their whole entire lives,
Sure.
which are going to be stuck
Right.
in jail,
Right.
because you can't see that. I mean, I almost wish like there was, like, the advisor, the information booth,
Right.
sitting in the court system going, well, here are your real options. Here are your real words.
Right.
Because I do think a lot of times you walk into a court and yes, they say justice is blind.
Right.
It depends on who knows how to use justice.
Sure.
Or who knows how to be able to do these things. And it's almost like you have to build these things into the system to be able to take out
Sure.
those biases
Yeah.
that exist in there. So legislation is critical.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the great things where I take heart, even though I look at a lot of the disparities that exist, and I practice law both in criminal and the civil side with great frequency, it becomes depressing sometimes, and you see the reality of what America has become, and not just in the state of Connecticut or in the city of Bridgeport, but throughout our land, right? The reality of what the judicial process has become. But the great thing is that it's a fixable problem. JFK is famous for quoting, saying that these are man-made problems, there's man-made solutions to them. And I wholeheartedly believe that, that when we start talking about the things that are affecting whatever community, whatever pockets, these are things that are fixable problems. All it requires is a little bit of elbow grease. With a little bit of elbow grease, it goes a long way. That's the beauty of democracy, right? It's to make sure that things don't become stagnant. Whenever we have a system where, whether it's an oligarchy or a dictatorship, they take us but so far, and their vision as human beings are but so limited, and their pulse on the reality of what happens on the ground level becomes less and less. So I just take a lot of heart. I'm running, and I see a lot of other candidates who are kind of new to the political process running, who are fine people. And hopefully we get an opportunity. Maybe Dominic, you can host this. We have a debate, and we can kind of air out these ideas, because these new ideas, if they're actually, if we have the courage and the fortitude to see them through the legislative process, could radically change a lot of the inequities that we see in the state of Connecticut. And instead of the state of Connecticut having this image which we have now, which we're regressive, we're tax heavy, we're burdensome, and you see this flight out of our state, both from a corporate level and from the affluent level, right? The people who are more affluent in our state, leaving our state in kind of droves. Now we can be at the tip of the spear and leading the fight for social change, leading the fight for higher education, leading the fight from a perspective of this is a Connecticut that's on the move, that's pushing forward, that has new ideas, that's creating social justice for people. That's attractive. That's attractive to millennials, who will soon be the majority of kind of the working class, if not already. And I think that brings people to the state of Connecticut when they see that we understand the issues, we're passionate about people, and we're making sure that Connecticut is a state that's on the move. So I take heart in the fact that we can fix these problems, and I know that we're going to do it.
I do, and you know what? You look at the bigger picture of your priorities and your dollars and cents. It costs $50,000 to have somebody incarcerated per year.
Right, and that's and we were talking about that. Yeah.
And that's compare that to people who, if we invested those dollars in people, obviously you have more people than people incarcerated.
Right.
But that's, I think, what people have to look at as what, there's a change in the perception of how we have to see things.
Right.
And we have to see things as an investment, in people, because human capital, you know what? It is what drives Connecticut. We have highly educated people who can, have that entrepreneurial spirit and everything else that they can bring forward in Connecticut.
Right.
But there's still, when you get down to it, there's disparities.
Right.
One of the things I was extremely happy to hear about is, how do we get out the cronyism and some of the other things that are involved in politics in the biggest city in the state. And I know when I take a look at the school budget, I believe the cities get the largest portion of school dollars, not
Right.
dollars per person,
Right.
but overall dollars.
Right.
And I don't live in Bridgeport. Obviously, I have an investment in Bridgeport because I think I'd like to see everybody, raise up where they are. But I look at that money, and I want to make sure that there's independent oversight over that. I know you've been on like the school board,
Sure.
and that's certainly been a big part of what you try to like take a look at what works and what doesn't work.
Let me tell you, if you look at my voting record and you look at what I've stood for, and we actually have a finance meeting tonight, which I'm excited to talk about some of these issues, where we've always made cuts historically in the city of Bridgeport is in the classroom. The people who always get the short end of the stick, if you will, the proverbial short end of the stick, are always the students. They're the ones whether it's programming or after school activities or you name it, they're the ones that we're always looking to cut there first. We had a big debacle with the Lighthouse program. They wanted to defund the Lighthouse program. Now, 55% of our cities are single mothers. 55% are single mothers. Now imagine what happens when a mother's working 2 or 3 jobs, and this is the only program that she has where her kids can go after school, go to a safe place where they're going to have somebody to help them with the homework and do the things that unfortunately she can't do because she has to provide for her family as a single parent. They were talking about cutting that program, letting the funding go down the drain. I fought hard. I put pressure on the administration to ensure that didn't happen. Now we have this new budget. I've been saying it. I've been beating this drum for a long time. The cuts have to come from the top. Leadership is only good if it leads by example. It has to run a tight ship. And that does mean that administrators who maybe go the extra mile are going to have to go a little further now. And I think of when Christ told people, if a Roman soldier tells you to carry his bag 1 mile, you carry it 2 miles. And I think that's the attitude of not just administrators, but people who are looking to serve in public office. We have to have the mindset that we're going to be zealots. We're going to go the extra mile. We're going to do the impossible. We're going to push that much harder. So I said the cuts need to come from the top. And we have a lot of directors and a lot of deputy directors and a lot of deputy superintendents who make well over or close to $200,000 a year that we simply can't afford. And it's great to have the help, but people are going to have to do more with less. It's just a reality because we cannot continue to cut in the classrooms. If we don't give our kids a quality education, statistics already say what's going to happen to them. They're going to be incarcerated. They're going to be a burden on society. They're going to be people who are going to have to live this life of this revolving door. So we can't make the cuts there. So it requires administrators to go even more of the extra mile to get things done. And I'm going to talk about that, and I've highlighted proposed cuts of what we're going to have to make, and all the cuts come from the upper echelons. A lot of the stuff which makes people feel uncomfortable comes from doing things, outsourcing a lot of things. I run a law firm. I'm one of the founders of this law firm. And we don't have in-house payroll. We outsource it. And the reason why we outsource our payroll is because it's more economical. You can hire AD, I don't want to advertise for anybody, but you can hire a company and they can do your payroll at a lesser price than hiring somebody to be on staff full time and paying their health insurance and paying this and paying that. So it just makes sense to look at things in a more progressive fashion and make actual cuts and be bold in what we're cutting and be strong and really put the children's best interest first, the parents' best interest first. Because what happens is if we give corporations and professional people a place where they can send their kids, public schools where they know their kids are going to get a great education, guess what happens to Bridgeport? People start moving back. And when people start moving back because they know that their kids are going to get a quality public school education, guess what happens? Corporations come back, jobs come back, because that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to live in a safe neighborhood and a place where they know their kids are going to get a quality education. And I think we can do that for people. It's just us being bold and courageous as leaders of saying these are the cuts that we have to make, and we're not going to play you're my buddy game and you're my friend game. And those things might all be true, but it just can't happen that way anymore. We need to say, what do we actually need? And what we don't need, we have to cut.
And it's difficult to do.
Sure.
Because, you know what, I mean, that's a long history of Bridgeport is the patronage and being able to make those changes really does, it takes leadership in order to be able to do that.
Right.
But you're right. How do we make things better? And it really starts, at the center with schools and the investments that we make. I know I had Jason Bartlett on here a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the after-school programs the different opportunities and things that he's like really done. And when he goes up and he fights in the legislature for like, you know, after school programs or for money for jobs for kids, people don't realize that, you know, they think that that's just like a giveaway. No, it's an investment.
Right.
We're investing in these kids, and these kids are going to help turn around and make places, New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford, you know, to bring people back towards them.
Right.
And I got to be honest with you. I mean, we had to go up into Seymour to go pick you up.
Yeah. I got lost in the valley.
I felt a little safer driving through Bridgeport at some points than I did driving through Seymour. No offense taken to Wayne back there, but
it was a scenic drive. I'll tell you that. It's always a scenic drive to come through the valley.
The center of the valley.
Yeah.
But you know, that's important.
Right.
It's important and that's really, if you look at where the next generation's going, is they want to live in vibrant cities. And you know, you can't turn things around until you have those sort of opportunities, and people will come back.
Sure.
I mean, it's just it's something. Obviously, I've lived in Fairfield County for the last 40 years, so obviously I've been coming back and forth to Bridgeport from my teenage years on up. You know, I had friends that lived over on Hospital Hill and some of the beautiful old Victorian houses. Right. And it's good to see some of the turnaround that's going on, because I see like a lot of the old brownfield factories being either repurposed or, you know, torn down.
Sure.
I think one of the big economic drivers, hopefully in the future here, would be in your district is over the new train station that
Sure.
they're talking about, and
right.
You know, dealing with the Remington's Arms property. I know I used to do work for Habitat for Humanity, so we used to be based out of there for a while.
Right. Right. For a long while.
Yeah.
For a long while, yeah.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. They were. So I've been in and out of that building, but you know, there's part of it is preserving some of those old pieces, and part of it is that some of them have outgrown their usefulness, and I think that the train station there is one of those things that can be that sort of like hub or that driver to bring people back in.
You know, and that's I'm glad you bring that point up as well, Dominic. You know, a lot of times there's this perception that if you're working class or if you're blue collar, there's an animosity or hatred towards the rich, and that's not the truth. You know, or if you're a minority, there's this automatic tension between minorities and upper middle class or people who are affluent, and that's not the truth. You know, it's about locking arms with everyone in society and saying whether you're white, you're brown, you're black, you're rich, you're poor. Society only works when we come together. You can't have a society where everyone is poor. We've tried that. That model has been tried. It's called housing projects. You put all people and you cluster them in a small section of your city or your town, and you say they're going to stay over there. They're going to be the forgotten. My father used to always tell us when he used to coach our t-ball teams. He used to always say, "You're only as strong as your weakest man." Right? On a baseball team, no matter how great of a pitcher you are, someone's going to get a hit off you, right? And if they get a hit off you and your first baseman's no good or your outfielder's no good, or they find out where your weak point is as your opposing team, then guess what? You're going to lose because they're going to keep drilling that area over there. So that becomes a reality, right? We're only as strong as the weakest and the most vulnerable people of our society. We have to find a way to strengthen them. We strengthen them by making partners. And making partners mean by saying the affluent have a role to play in society, right? We can't just push them out and neglect them and say they have absolutely nothing to do here in our city or we don't want them around. It's becoming partners with corporations and saying, these are the things we're doing. These are the things that we're willing to offer you as a corporation to come in, because the new America that we'd like to see is an America where everybody's included. It's an America where our corporate leaders and our community leaders and our blue collar and our white collar understand that we want to see a vibrant America. We want to see a vibrant Connecticut. We want to see a place where everybody can have a chance to breathe fresh air. And if you want to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and go here or there or maintain your status quo of your living, that you can make an honest day living in the state of Connecticut, but we're not going to tax you to death. We're not going to allow criminals to run rampage, and you're going to get the services that you deserve and need. And we can build that world. We can build that reality for the state of Connecticut. But it's a mindset of saying the impossible is possible, right? That these guys who've been felt neglected, whether it be the rich or the poor, that we have to come together and work as a cohesive. And I think we can do that. I really do. I see what's going on in Fairfield County, and it's become a world of the haves and the have-nots, right? The difference between Westport and Bridgeport is astounding. And it should upset every single American, regardless of what spectrum you're on. You should look at that and say, that can't be the America that I live in, where you have a world of the have and the have-nots. It has to be a world where we all come together and we have a kind of a kumbaya moment, if you will, right? A world where we realize that if Bridgeport is weak, America's weak, right? And we have to find a way to strengthen it. And I think it's us organically as the leaders of Bridgeport, or those aspiring to be leaders, of being strong and being genuine leaders, of talking to our constituency and saying, these are the cuts we have to make, and this is why. And it's not because we have to, it's because they're not working. Let's look at what's working and what's not working and make genuine cuts, and not cuts from the standpoint of saying, well, I have to make cuts because we don't have the money. No, it's how are we investing in our people and how are we investing in our city to make sure that we're moving forward. And I think that's what leadership needs to do, right? Is to take a hard look at these budgets and take a hard look at maybe cronyism in the politics of our city and saying, no more. This is where the buck stops, and we're going to do things the right way for the people.
Well, I think it comes down to metrics.
Sure.
You have to be able to measure, and if something's not measuring up, you have to be able to say, okay, well, let's look and ask the questions why it's not measuring up. And I always, obviously, I've worked in management for many years. I worked for myself for a lot of years.
Right.
And I know there's different styles to management. There's those people that make you fearful that you're going to lose everything that you have, and that you have to come up with a reason and an excuse, and they're like the ones that are like firing down at you. And then you have those people that come along and they take a holistic look at not just like one little piece that might be having difficulty, but like the whole puzzle.
Sure.
And be able to say, well, how do we improve this? How do we get people pulled in and involved and want to see the change and not just hold on to their piece of the pie?
Right.
Because when everybody's going at the same slice,
Sure.
the slice gets smaller.
Exactly.
When everybody figures out that we got to, grow the pie of everybody else around us,
Right.
that's when we're not like looking at all of our little like section of the world.
Right.
And I think it takes a lot from a leadership standpoint to be able to look at that and not to assign blame. And not that people should be like blame free of things, but to say, okay, this is what happened up to this point.
Sure.
How do we do it differently? How do we get people like pulled in and embrace like the change and not just feel fear for what they're going to lose?
Right. And you know what? One of the things I always say, and I say this to my fellow board members on the Board of Ed, and I continue with this ethos hopefully into the legislature, is that as a leader, the attitude should always be put the blame on me. Because my father always used to tell us, and I always go back to my father. It's funny how you go to all this schooling and you always remember the words of your parents and your mentors. Those words kind of always resonate with you. But he always said, son, there's no such thing as a bad follower or only bad leaders, right? So if something is wrong, it's your job, if you want to be a leader, to fix it, right? So too often times do I hear and see elected officials who will say, well, it's not my fault, or it's not my problem, or it's not my responsibility. It's this person or that person. And then the finger game starts, everybody starts pointing the finger at somebody. I remember President Truman, when he was elected into office, he put a nameplate on the front of his desk that said, the buck stops here. right? And I think that that needs to be the ethos that we all carry into whether it's a legislature or a board of education or whatever have you, right? The buck stops here. We have to own it. We have to be honest with the people. We have to say, you know, I am the reason why it doesn't go right if I'm not putting forth a solution, if I'm not advocating for changes, if I'm not standing by my principles. So you can blame me if it's not going the right way. And I think that has to be the attitude, because when people see that, first is going to make sure that as leaders that we actually make changes that we are running on. But secondly, people understand that you're a person who's a doer. And that's what we need, I think, in the state of Connecticut. That's what we need in the 23rd District, is somebody who's going to continue a legacy of doing. And that's important. And there's a lot that needs to be done. There's a whole lot that needs to be done. And it starts off with things like education. We were talking earlier about giving people the ability to go into advanced education, higher learning, and not being saddled with this debt, which doesn't help America, doesn't help Americans, doesn't help our future. And secondly, limits people from being able to be the great person that they can be. We should not have an America where the only people who are successful are the people who say, my mommy and my daddy are doctors and lawyers and they afforded me X opportunity, right? It should be in America that if you have the ability, if you have the drive, if you have the God-given grace to be something, fill in the blank, that you're able to do that, right? That you're not limited because of where you come from in the world. So I see a state of Connecticut that once again is a leader in higher education. And we have historically been that, but we've kind of lost that. And the way I think we do that is by saying, if you make the grade, if you get accepted into college, we don't care what your mom and dad did or where you come from socioeconomically. We're going to ensure that you go and you're able to pursue higher education. And what does that require? They're going to say, well, where are you going to get the money for that, Dennis? Well, where we get the money for that is by shifting our focus as to what programs work and which ones don't. Because we know education works, so we should be doubling and tripling down on education. And we know which other programs have not been working, so why aren't we honest with the people of the state of Connecticut and saying, these things no longer work? So now we're going to invest in those things that do work.
Well, and I think when you speak about education has a lot of different avenues,
Sure.
and there are obviously a lot of opportunities that are out there, you know, in jobs that go unfulfilled. I know one of the places that I drive past, like in the Stratford side of the 23rd District, is Stratton Industries.
Sure.
Right there as you get on the highway. And I always see the sign up
Yeah.
that they're looking for machinists.
Right.
All the time.
Yeah.
Years I've been driving past there, and they're always looking for and I think that's something that we have to give kids exposure to say that, you know, here are where the opportunities are.
Right.
It's not like the olden days where you could walk into a factory and you could go on the line and you didn't really, you know, need a high school education, and you could survive and be all right with that.
Absolutely.
But those jobs are not there anymore. They've been you know, robotized, and they've been taken away. And
Sure.
and it's really the people. You know, you need a certain level of education, and a lot of it's hands-on. I think more of the apprenticeship type programs that are out there, because I think there's a lot of, you know, skilled labor positions
Sure.
that go unfilled. But you know what? We need to expose people to these opportunities. And I think one of the things I was talking about, my friend that introduced the bill, it was to teach coding, computer coding as a language.
As language, yeah.
Because that's a universal language that gets used throughout the world.
Right.
But it's the exposure that we give, and it's helping people to see beyond just what's in front of them.
Right. You know, a lot of times, unfortunately, in politics, is people play on people's fears and frustrations. It's an old method of politicking that we've maybe seen in our recent political history, right? Well, I think that we need to be courageous as now, if the people are looking now to run for public office, to embrace the reality of our future. And those are the things that you're talking about. Some of these programs that you're talking about are exactly that. The world is becoming a smaller and smaller place. We don't need to live in a world where we're fearful of that and construct walls, but rather construct bridges, right? We need to embrace the reality where we're going. A lot of times we're saying, well, we're going to make sure that we get these jobs back that we've lost to China or Mexico or India. Those jobs are gone, and it's okay, because there's great things that America is yet to do. And it's not looking at our past and being shackled to it, but rather using it as handrails to the future. We've always been a nation since our inception that has inspired the world. And we don't need to now become a nation that looks at the things that we used to do and what we were great at in the past and say, well, we have to be stuck in that reality. I believe in an America that's going to last another 1,000 years. And I want to make sure that happens. And I know that the state of Connecticut is going to be, once again, as it always has been since our inception in 1775, here we are in 2018, we're going to continue to be the tip of the spear. And I want to see that come to reality. And it's by looking at a world that we say we continue to be world leaders, and we're spearheading industry and education, and we're ensuring that our youth are going to have the ability to be even greater.
Now, I know some of the specifics that are going to come up, and certainly they're trying to work on them right at the moment. They're hoping for bills, but not that I'm being predictive here.
Sure.
But I think these are going to be major issues that are going to come up next session.
Sure.
Gaming facility in Bridgeport. How do you feel about it?
I'm going to tell you this. Bridgeport is in a position right now where we show that we're regressive and we continue to blow away opportunities, or we show that we're a city that's actually on the move. I think that everybody in the city of Bridgeport who I've been able to speak to is very excited about it. It's about doing it the right way. And doing it the right way means community involvement, and that's hard because you're going to have everybody who has a lot of fears and worries as to what that's going to look like to bring something like that to the east end of Bridgeport. East is kind of in the middle between the east end and the east side of Bridgeport. So it's doing it community. It's about doing it smart and realizing the commitments that we've made with indigenous populations in the state of Connecticut. So making sure that we don't further disenfranchise a group that historically has been disenfranchised. But I think it's also about understanding that Bridgeport has to move forward. And understanding what that looks like. And not only is it just, looking at what Bridgeport, the benefits that's going to happen in Bridgeport, but being conscious of our neighbors in Fairfield County specifically. And what that might look like with their concerns with traffic issues and their concerns with pollution, be it sound pollution or otherwise, making sure that we address those issues as well. But I see an America that will no longer rely so heavily on automobiles, but rely more heavily on public transit. I see that as a way of moving forward. We already have things like high-speed rails. Those things already exist. Countries like Europe and Japan already have these things implemented. There's no reason why in the state of Connecticut you should have to wait 45 minutes up to an hour to get a train to Grand Central Station. We have technology that could limit that. And by bringing that technology, we're talking about bringing train station, other things to the state of Connecticut, we can limit those things, right? Our ferry, we don't really utilize it to its maximum potentials and ability. I mean, I see Connecticut that's so big where we even Bridgeport builds maybe even one of the largest bridges that gets us into New York and back. And obviously, I mean, that's far out there, and people say, well, how can that possibly happen? But I see us growing as a country and as a state. So it's scary to a lot of people. People talk about crime. People talk about, what the not allowing the other communities to kind of partake in what's happening. But those are things that we can address. And we can ensure that everybody has a fair shake of the business that comes in, and that we make sure that we don't just simply gentrify and push out communities that have been there since Bridgeport has been Bridgeport. So we just have to make people know that leadership is there to protect them and ensure that what happens that's new, that they're part of the progress and not just simply being pushed to the side. And I think we can do that. I think we can bring all the stakeholders to the table and say, this is what Bridgeport needs. What do you guys need? How do we make this become a reality?
My other big ones, legalization of marijuana.
So that's obviously very popular. A lot of people from my demographic, age demographic, are pushed hard for that. I have two reservations on it. First is, in our community, you see a bunch of mini marks or bodegas, as they call them in the Latin community, that sell loosey cigarettes and alcohol, and they sell them all day and all night. They're not supposed to. But everybody knows whether you go to UB, Sacred Heart, Fairfield University, or wherever. You go into a urban community, you can get anything you want, from a bodega. I'm not talking about illegal drugs. I'm talking about legal forms of stimulation. That scares me. That worries me. I've seen personally 9 and 10-year-olds go into liquor store and bring alcohol for adults. I've seen young children going in and buying packs of cigarettes. I'm tired of seeing minority communities, specifically poor communities, specifically being targeted for these type of things. I mean, Philip Morris lost a multi-million-dollar lawsuit because they were targeting urban area minority children with their cartoon ads and things of that nature. So I'm a little concerned about that. Colorado was one of the states that spearheaded this and was a leader in the nation in legalizing it. And their mantra was African Americans get arrested by disparaging numbers with marijuana, so we legalized it. Guess what happened? African Americans continue to be arrested disparagingly in the state of Colorado. So we have to realize in America that what we have is not a marijuana problem, is a racial problem, right? Because legalizing marijuana didn't change the numbers in Colorado. So I believe that if you have a medical need, and obviously science has said that there's needs to it, but full-blown legalization to the extent that you can just go to any corner store, I believe that should be decriminalized, as we have done here in the state of Connecticut, where you'll get a fine for things like that. But full-blown legalizing marijuana, I have reservations about it right now, I'll be honest with you, because I don't want to see poor communities again being targeted by corporations who have a nefarious history of targeting these communities and ensuring that there's no progress. Alcohol has made a very negative impact in the community. I know a lot of people who are alcoholics and struggle with substance abuse. I don't want to see another substance being introduced to the community with nefarious targeting and advertising that causes another problem. I mean, it's already there. People say that people already use this substance. It's, why not take it out of the hands of the mafia? I'll tell you this. They said the same thing about alcohol. If you wanted to buy alcohol the days of Al Capone, you had to do a special knock and you go to speakeasy, right? If you wanted to gamble in the days of Al Capone and the Italian mafia, you needed to know a bookie, you needed to be involved in the underworld, right? Nowadays, you go up to one of the casinos and grandma loses her Social Security check and loses the house and refinances on it and everything's gone and any chance of inheritance goes away. And they put advertising all up and down all the major highways. And you can come on down and spend your money. The same thing with alcohol, right? Back in the days, you wanted to drink. There was a kind of a back room, dark corner way about going about it. Nowadays, you see it in every advertising everywhere in America. Get a cold bud or whatever have you. So legalizing has, I think, a more dire consequence than just simply a guy in the corner who sells narcotics, because they lack the business sophistication to make sure that it's introduced as rampantly as it can be if it was a corporation who was in charge of it.
I always go back to the same thing that I discussed about the criminal reform. Your brain's not fully developed until 26.
Right.
And you're right. This stuff out there is going to be one of the big issues. And I do agree. There's a medical utility, especially for people who have uncontrolled seizures, possible for pain management over some of the other things that are out there. But there's also the side of addiction that we need to be aware of and to figure out. I mean, everybody, goes, oh, great, a revenue source. But you're right. There's a lot more to it than just, okay, we see this as money, or we see this as trying to ensure people of color don't end up in the same arrest rates. But decriminalizing, I hope, has made changes within that. I haven't seen the specific studies that go along with that. But I mean, these are all the important issues that we need to take a look at and address and think thoughtfully about, not just be coming down on one side or the other.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, again, I think we bring the stakeholders, and it might be done in the right way, in a way which is equitable for all communities. But I just, I always have a little bit of caution when we're talking about substances. And I'm not saying marijuana is better or less than alcohol. I'm saying alcohol has brought us, before the cell phone, number one cause of death on the highway, guess what it was? Drunk driving.
Yeah.
Before texting became popular, that was the number one cause. So we can't simply say alcohol is not a big deal, it's not a big vice. It's a huge vice. It's changed the lives of millions of people. People driving drunk on the streets. So right now we don't even have a way of policing it. So we go legalize marijuana. We could test to see if you're drunk. How do we test to see if you're high?
And there's no way to be able to test what those limits are.
Sure.
So I mean, it's almost like you could pull somebody over and be like, okay, well, let me test it. Well, it sticks around in your system for 30 days.
Right, exactly. Right. So you might have somebody who used it 30 days ago, and now they're getting arrested for driving high, and now we're going to see numbers and get increased, and they're black and brown, and they're getting arrested because it looks like they're high or whatever, biases exist in the policing of this stuff. So we just have to be a little more thoughtful before we say, yeah, sure, full-blown proliferation, whoever wants to smoke it. I just don't think that's the right way of ensuring that the community's safe.
So I hate to cut this conversation short. Yeah. I know 55 minutes goes real quick.
It goes really fast.
When
Absolutely.
I have somebody as good as you discussing it. Yeah. I give you the last minute if you want to talk to the people that are your constituents out there. And
well, I just simply want to say, Dominic, thank you for allowing me to be on your show. This is our second time us doing it. It's always a world of fun. I'm sorry it took me so long to find the studio, but now I know exactly where it is. It won't happen again. And unlike Dominic, I enjoyed my ride to see more in the Valley. I always do. But no, I really do appreciate this opportunity. I take it very serious running for state senate. I know the burdens that our state is faced with. I know the hardships that we have in our budget. I feel that with my experience of running a business, of understanding the law, of studying the law, that I'm the best situated candidate for the times that we're living in right now. I have a genuine heart for the people of Bridgeport and Stratford, and if the people allow me to have this chance to represent you, I know I will represent you well. And I'm asking for your vote and your support. Come our primary, it's August 14th is our primary. So I hope that those of you who are registered to vote, that you please come out and vote, and you vote for Dennis Bradley. I appreciate it. Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank
God
you.
bless you in your mission.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And with that, we can run the street.
Okay.